Welcome to the channel of PACIFIC414. Show us this loyalty. Throw yourself onto the subscribe button and submit yourself to the live streams, gaming streams, and so much more. Pathetic earthlings, I command you. Welcome to the channel of PACIFIC414. Show us this loyalty. Throw yourself onto the subscribe button and submit yourself to the live streams, gaming streams, and so much more. Pathetic earthlings, I command you.
Warning, due to adult language and humor, the following content may not be suitable for any viewers under the age of 18. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The views and opinions expressed during the following live stream or video content are those of the individual and may not reflect those of others. Thank you. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on when you're watching this and depending on what order, that could change too. As far as the introduction is concerned, and welcome one and all to Pacific 4 and 4 Pop Talk episode review of The Last of Us episode 6, Kin. Now, this episode, as you can see, scrolling on the bottom of your screen, will contain some spoilers. I will try to keep the spoilers to a bare minimum, but I've said that before and haven't really kept it to a bare minimum like I had hoped, only because in order to explain certain parts of the episode, certain parts of the story, you have to reveal some dirt. So, this episode takes place 3 months after last week's episode, Endure and Survive, where we last saw Joel and Ellie leaving Kansas City, and they were heading west to Wyoming. Well, they end up getting to Wyoming after having an exchange with an older couple who tells them about some of the undead, as I like to call them, or shroom zombies, mushroom zombies, as I've referred to them before. And they're told about the infected, and Joel, at gunpoint, tells the gentleman and his wife that they're going to give him and Ellie some supplies and the gentleman's gun so they can move on. As a matter of fact, to make it a little easier to explain everything that's going on, this is the gentleman who comes home after hunting some rabbit for he and his wife to consume, and also for he and his wife to probably make a few clothing items out of. And of course, he's shocked to see Ellie and Joel there. And of course, he says to his wife, "You let them in?" And she goes, "Well, yeah, oops, skipping a little too far ahead there. Sorry about that." And another thing we find out, let me just get to the wife. Here, let me scoot it back just a little bit more. And I'm doing this live, folks. So, all right. So, this is where the wife says, "Yes, I made them soup. It's cold." And long story short, Joel wants the gentleman's gun. He wants the rifle. And he wants to know how close he is to Jackson, the last known location of Tommy. And that's where they're told about the undead across the river of death. And they are told you'll never make it. And Joel even asks for a map, and the gentleman says, "What? You left your area without a map?" So the gentleman marks where they currently are and also marks where the settlement is. So then Joel and Ellie end up leaving. And as they're leaving, Joel stops and leans up against a post, and everything's distorted as far as the sound is concerned because Joel, as we learned in episode 4, is that he's deaf in his right ear and it's messing with his equilibrium. So he has to stop. And we have a couple of scenes where Joel and Ellie are talking about various items, and she wants to actually learn how to shoot a gun and do a few other things, and they end up you know w- telling each other a few things as far as Ellie's education and also about Joel letting her know about what went on before. And of course, that's one of the themes of this episode of learning about life before everything went to crap, at least as far as Ellie's perspective is, since she didn't live through it. And there's a scene where they make camp. They discuss who's going to take watch, as you can see here. And Joel ends up falling asleep. And of course, Ellie starts telling him once again that he's mumbling, as you can see there. So they approach this bridge and they end up going across this bridge that's over a river. And as they get across the bridge and into open land, they are then surrounded by a lookout party. And they're going around their settlement and looking for anybody who might be infected and might actually come and raid their settlement there in Jackson, Wyoming. So they actually have a dog who sniffs out the infected, and he first goes up to Joel, sniffs Joel. Joel's good. And then all of a sudden, the dog is looking at Ellie, and the dog is growling at Ellie, sniffs Ellie, and then all of a sudden, you hear Ellie giggling and laughing, and she's petting the dog. So Ellie's all clear. They end up taking Joel and Ellie back to the facility where they start waving a red flag to the lookout on the tower to open the gates. Upon opening the gates, it's a Wyoming western town, and that's where Joel and Tommy are indeed reunited. So we have this reunion between Joel and Tommy, and then we have the scene inside where Joel and Ellie are eating some much needed nourishment, where we find out the name of one of the lookouts, and her name is Maria. This is Maria right here. And in this scene, we learn that Tommy and Maria are now married, and they are also expecting. So we learn a little bit more about the town, how they facilitate things, and they actually are able to generate their own electricity thanks to this dam. They managed to figure out how to get it operational. So they live a pretty good life in this town, but they also don't advertise themselves because they don't want to deal with a raiding party coming to take their supplies where they have food and animals. And this is where Joel and Tommy end up sharing a drink together, and also where Joel says, you know, I did what I had to do. We did what we had to do when this whole thing first started out, where they were going around and they mentioned that they murdered people. And Joel wants to know, what happened after he ditched him. And Tommy says, after, as you can see here, after I ditched the Fireflies, Maria and her crew found me. So let me just go ahead, turn off the rest of the closed captions here. There we go. And let me pause that. But we find out some information, and of course, we also find out at this point that Maria is expecting. So we move on, and Ellie is taking a shower, and then after she takes a shower, she goes across the street where Tommy and Maria live, and she sees above the fireplace, trying to get to it. Let's see if I can get a good shot of it. All right, can't really get to the right time frame on this, but over the mantle of the fireplace, there's a chalkboard, and there's the name of Kevin, and of course, there's the name of Sarah. We come to learn that Kevin was Maria's son, who unfortunately died. And of course, they're also remembering Sarah, who died early on with this whole outbreak. So, this is where we have a scene between Ellie and Maria, and Maria is cutting Ellie's hair, and we find out that Maria, before everything went to hell, was a district attorney, and she says, I put the bad guys away. And after they have their opening conversation where they're getting to know each other, this is where they bring up some history as far as Joel is concerned, as far as Tommy is concerned. And Maria says, do you feel safe with Joel, especially with some of the things that he's done in the past? And Maria gets a retort from Ellie saying, well, do you feel safe with Tommy, especially based on what he's done in his. And of course, they reach neutral ground, and then it's off to the movies. In this town, they have a movie theater, and everybody is enjoying some popcorn and watching a movie. Meanwhile, this is where Tommy and Joel are having another conversation between brothers, between family, and this is where Joel says, "My faculties are slipping. I can't hear well, and in all honesty, Tommy, you're the better person to take Ellie the rest of the way." But what ends up happening is Ellie does overhear all this, and it's when Joel arrives at their residence in this community where Ellie says, "You're the only person that's stuck around with me long enough." And she doesn't want Joel to leave her. She says she could go with Tommy, but she wouldn't feel safe. She feels safe with Joel because Joel has been looking out for her. So then, come morning, Joel is about to leave town by himself when he's confronted by Tommy and Ellie, and Joel ends up taking one of the horses and ends up leaving the town of Jackson, Wyoming with Ellie, has one final goodbye with Tommy, and Joel and Ellie head their way to East Colorado University. That is their destination. That is where some of the doctors they come to learn are stationed. So they're going across, going toward I-25, and they do end up arriving at East Colorado University, where they see just like everything else that we've seen in this post apocalyptic world, as far as the setting of this series is concerned, everything is run down, and they come upon one of the laboratories where there are monkeys running about. Let's see if I can get back to where you actually see them. Yeah. So this is where they first see the monkeys. They're all running around the campus of the university, and Joel and Ellie are looking around for anybody who might have stayed behind, because this was supposed to be the facility that Joel took Ellie, and it was supposed to be the place where they could devise the cure. Unfortunately, with nobody there, they are left alone until, oops, went ahead a little bit, until when they're inside one of the laboratories, they look down and they see these four men wandering about. So Joel and Ellie try to make an escape. One of the men actually attacks Joel and they get into a scuffle. Joel ends up killing the man, but Joel ends up getting stabbed in the stomach and starts bleeding out once he pulls the knife out. And as you can see with some of the smaller images, I'm not going to say what happens in the rest of the episode, but it leaves you on another cliffhanger as we head into episode 7. Overall, I didn't think this episode was too bad. It did start off a little slow, and there were some pacing issues at the beginning, but if you look at it from a story perspective, they're trying to set up the reunion of Joel and Tommy and give you 3 months worth of information from where Joel and Ellie were in last week's episode to where they are in this week's episode. I thought the acting performance was very good, especially from Pedro Pascal. And as far as Ellie is concerned, it still seems like every few seconds she has to say a curse word, and I just don't understand why you have to use, you know, cursing to get your point across every few seconds. You know, I can understand if the character's trying to explain something, and there's a revelation, and they go, you know, all this, all that. But as far as the cursing in the show, it continues. Now, you know, Gabriel Luna was good for his part in this episode as Tommy. I don't know the name of the actress who played Maria, but she was good for the parts that you actually do see her. And I'm curious to see where this story goes as far as when you compare it to the game and when you compare to the choice that they made for this live action adaptation. I haven't played the game, but I have seen certain cutscenes trying to prepare myself for what may or may not happen in this live action version of The Last of Us. So there's that. Again, one of my big drawbacks, I did think it had to be the pacing issue, but again, I understand why this episode was going as slow as it was. So, as far as a rating for this episode is concerned, I would have to give it a 6.5 out of 10. It it wasn't one of those episodes that really, you know, stood out. It told its story, but a again, the pacing issue, even with the reason why I said there was a pacing issue, was just, a little too slow. I think you could have done a few things with the older couple and then quickly moved on to arriving in Jackson, Wyoming. Now, if they're just following the paces of the game, that's another thing. But this episode, it just seemed to stall in certain points, especially when you had the talk between Tommy and Joel before Joel ends up leaving the next day. But again, having not played the game, this could just be following the exact line of the game. But overall, this is a 6.5 out of 10. Now, if I rewatch it and the rating goes up higher, well, I'll definitely let you all know in the comments section. But for me, this episode was 6.5 out of 10. The series is watchable, but I wouldn't say it's groundbreaking television. I wouldn't say that you have to go on a mountaintop or a hilltop and start yelling off the top of your lungs, go watch The Last of Us. I just I just don't look at it that way. Now, maybe once I start playing the game, I'll have a different take on it. That can happen. But as far as this episode's concerned, 6.5 out of 10. I did like the fact that in this episode, you do find out when Joel says to Tommy, "You've got to take Ellie the rest of the way," as to why Tommy says he can't do it. I did like that. That is understandable, but I'm curious to see where the rest of this story goes. And we will find out with episode 7 next Sunday. And that review again will be live. I will try to have it at the same time as tonight's. But for those of you who are watching on the replay, thank you for watching. Thank you for watching if you're watching this live. And if you like this review, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. Leave a comment down in the comment section below and consider subscribing to the Pacific Forum for YouTube channel. I not only give episode reviews with this portion of Pacific Forum for Pop Talk, but I also do the main show of Pacific Forum for Pop Talk every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern and every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Once again, that is 1 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. And until then, I hope to see you all Tuesday night when I continue with Hogwarts Legacy. Have a good night, all.